Welcome. My name is Brandon. Please join me on this tour of Burnsville Center in Burnsville, Minnesota. Burnsville is a middle ring suburb of the Twin Cities, located south of the Minnesota River in Dakota County. Burnsville is a town whose population exploded at the end of the 20th century. Burnsville was literally a small town with under 600 residents in 1950. By 1970, it had nearly 20,000 residents. By 2000, it had around 60,000 residents and has stayed around that level ever since. Burnsville Center was not the town's first mall. We begin our story in 1963 with a strip mall called Jet Plaza, located on a site about 2 miles northwest of Burnsville Center. The original mall was the right size for a small town. It started with a grocery store, drugstore, and post office. It was later renamed to Valley Ridge Shopping Center. Valley Ridge survived until 2010 or 2011, when it was torn down to build the Valley Ridge Retirement Community. Yes, I did mean to film the 20-year-old carpet. I will let the footage speak for itself. Let's jump ahead a decade to 1973. Home Art Development Company, a subsidiary of Sears Roebuck & Company, announced plans for a new shopping center to be opened in 1976 in Burnsville. Architectonic Inc. of Chicago were the project architects. C.H. Leavell of Dallas was the general contractor. Home Art planned for Burnsville to be the largest shopping center in the region. They developed plans to build the mall on a 114-acre site west of Interstate 35W and south of County Road 42. Even though the population of Burnsville was now around 20,000 residents, it wasn't enough for a super regional mall. However, the developers were thinking bigger. They were planning for people to travel far to shop at this grand shopping center. People in southern Minnesota would no longer need to cross the Minnesota River to visit a large mall. Even in 2021, it is still the largest mall south of the river and north of Des Moines, Iowa. That is, if you exclude malls from the extreme ends, extreme west or east of Iowa. In 1974, Home Art opened Maplewood Mall. Burnsville was still under construction. 1975 passed. In 1976, Home Art opened Eden Prairie Center. Burnsville wasn't going to be finished that year. Home Art eventually set the opening date to August 1977, with the mall designed for 120 to 150 shops and 4 anchors. It had 400,000 square feet of leasable space. Sears started their catalog service in mid-1977. Powers and Dayton's opened on July 31st, 1977. The 4th anchor, Penny's, was still not open. Burnsville Center had its grand opening on Wednesday, August 3rd, 1977, with 3 anchors and 100 shops. The mall was opened by the president of Home Art, William A. Toombs, and Burnsville Mayor Pete Ochsner. Miss Minnesota, Debbie Cossett, Miss USA, Barbara Peterson, Miss Burnsville Junior Miss, Terry Bachland, and comedian Pat Paulsen were also in attendance. Pat Paulsen was part of the mall's ad campaign, Picky People, Pick Burnsville Center. The mall opened to the public at 9:20 a.m., with the opening ceremony starting at 9:30. Around 10 a.m., Pat Paulsen cut the ribbon and thousands of people started shopping. Miss Minnesota and Miss USA put on performances followed by students, of the School of Polynesian Dance when they are interrupted by Pat Paulsen in Polynesian garb to perform a show and remind people to sign up to win a trip for two to Hawaii. Yeah, it was the 1970s. I would have rather have seen more dancing. Learning about Pat Paulsen as a guy who interrupts local dance schools doesn't make him sound very funny, but I watched a couple old videos of his and got some legitimate chuckles. Did you know that Burnsville Center had a mascot? She was Mrs. Pickburn the chicken. Pickburn as in pick Burnsville, as in choose Burnsville Center. On another side note, I have heard rumors that a ghost of a worker who died during the mall's construction haunts the mall by the Sears. You can peer into the abandoned Sears today. What would you find more frightening to see staring back at you? The ghost or Mrs. Pickburn? I cannot find any news articles about a death during construction. It's just one of those rumors that thought I would share. Okay, back to opening day. Other stores that opened were GNC, Radio Shack, B. Dalton, Fanny Farmer, Nutrition World, Pearl Vision, Kinney Shoes, Spencer Gifts, County Seat, Foot Locker, Walden Books, Gordon Jewelers, Bachman's, Products of Hollywood, and a movie theater. Whew! There were a lot more, but I chose to share businesses that you may have heard of before. In 1978, the last Anchor Pennies finally opened. Moving into the 1980s, in 1983, a second 4-screen movie theater called UA Movies 5 through 8 at Burnsville was built on the mall's parking lot. Powers became a Donaldson's in 1985 when Allied Stores acquired 6 of the 7 Powers stores to increase their Donaldson's brand to compete with Dayton's. In 1987, Campbell Corporation bought out the Allied Stores Corporation, but due to the debt from the acquisition, they had to sell off their Donaldson's stores. Carson Perry Scott & Co. acquired the brand for $163.5 million, changing the name to Carson Perry Scott & Co. in April 1988. Now, going back to the beginning of the decade, a chain reaction was beginning a mere 10 miles north of Burnsville Center that would lead to the mall's future problems. In 1982, the Minnesota Twins baseball team and Minnesota Vikings football team moved out of the Metropolitan Stadium, leaving an empty 78 acres of land in Bloomington. In 1986, the Bloomington Port Authority signed an agreement to develop the land into the Mall of America. A year later, Burnsville Center celebrated its 10-year anniversary. Things were looking bright. The mall had grown from 91 stores in 1977 to 154, with 66 of those being original tenants. An interview with the marketing director from 1987 repeats the vision that the mall was not only for people in Dakota County, but for all of southern Minnesota and northern Iowa. The director even calls out talking to people visiting from 3 towns: New Ulm, Minnesota, Albert Lea, Minnesota, and Mason City, Iowa. This may have been deliberate, as the 3 cities she mentioned all had malls in 1987. Side note, as of 2021, Mark Klotz in New Ulm has shuttered its doors. The 2 malls in Albert Lea and 2 malls in Mason City still exist, but they are not in the best of conditions. In 1989, the ramps in the center of the mall were replaced with an elevator to allow more space in the food court. Capacity jumped from 180 to 490 people, but that same year, trouble was continuing to brew 10 miles up the freeway. The Mall of America broke ground on June 14, 1989. I am going to pause for a bit so you can enjoy the elevator ride down to the lower level. I thought you might like a break from the storefronts. Okay, this sign made me laugh a little. The Gordmans had been closed nearly a year when I filmed this. Sorry, Curiosifer, I wasn't breaking into Gordmans, I just needed to use the bathroom. If I'd had a marker on me, I could have fixed the sign. Oh well. Now on to the 1990s. In 91, the mall added a second elevator. In 92, the Mall of America, or Mega Mall as Minnesotans called it back then, opened to much fanfare. In 1995, Sears sold Homart Development Co. to General Growth Properties Inc. for $2.3 billion. Burnsville was still thriving at their 20th anniversary in 1997. They had 90% capacity and 4 anchors. The Powers location was now on its third rebranding as Mervyn's. In 1998, sales were up 13% over 1997, which was over 11% over 1996. This led CBL and Associates Properties Inc. of Chattanooga, Tennessee, to buy Burnsville Center that year. There was also talk of an upcoming renovation with the possibility of moving the food court into an anchor and maybe even building an ice skating rink on the lower level. Before discussing the 21st century, I thought I would break up the mall's history with some personal anecdotes. This is a rather long video, as it is a large mall, and I wanted to capture as much as I could with 4K video. In May 2020, I decided I had finally seen enough shaky cam mall videos of now demolished malls that I needed to start filming malls myself. I ordered a pair of $50 spy glasses and headed out June 7th with a friend. "Let's go to Albert Lee," I exclaimed. "I've been to Northbridge twice, and it is a great mall to film." A third of the way there, I decided it was a waste of time and gas for a beginner to drive 90 miles for their first mall. I asked my friend to go to Burnsville instead. Now, if you have been following my channel, you might know my first video was Viking Plaza. I actually filmed Burnsville first, but my footage was just frankly terrible. Also, during the process of editing, another Dead Mall fan shot and released his own footage of Burnsville Center. And it was just so much better than my own footage. I would argue mine was objectively worse, so I scrapped it. Looking back, it was funny that I thought I could just look at things randomly with spy glasses and then just fix everything in post. I also assumed my friend would be okay being in shots. I mean, heck, I see a lot of mall videos of people's friends in them just wandering around, just getting a little bit of exercise, looking at stores. But my friend did not want to be on YouTube. At least I captured some footage of Gordman's when it was open. I don't think my Viking Plaza footage is great anymore, but I will discuss that and why my first video was of a mall 120 miles away from my town when I return and film Viking Plaza in 4K. We finally reached the 21st century. Burnsville was doing well at the beginning of the century. The mall had a second major renovation in 2001, which also included the exterior of the mall. They replaced the 1970s brick with more cheerful blues and whites. However, Burnsville lost its original movie theater in 2000, and then the newer movie theater in 2001. But don't fret, movie fans. In 2007, a 15-screen IMAX theater was constructed on the property not too far from the second movie theater. It is still open today. Also in 2001, Dayton's was rebranded to Marshall Fields. The middle of the decade saw the carving up of one of the mall's 4 anchors. Mervyn's closed in August 2004, and then Steve & Barry's opened on the bottom floor of the location in October 2005. Dick's Sporting Goods opened on the top floor of the former anchor. In addition to Dick's, a mini lifestyle center was built into the northern face of the building, with businesses that had no inner mall access. Sorry, I just had to include that. The poor person who runs that stand. When I returned in May, it was a roaring dinosaur that growled repeatedly instead. 2006, Marshfields was rebranded to Macy's. 2009, Steve & Barry's left the mall when the company liquidated all of its stores. If you were wondering why I filmed the mall mostly in March and then returned in May, it is due to the fact that I forgot to film the former Powers building, as today it is frankly kind of dull. Back in March, I just had to capture the looming Macy's entrance that gave me a feeling of dread. I needed to film the 1970s entrances of Penny's. The black label scars of Sears, they were begging to be filmed. The Gordman's entrance of the former Powers was abandoned, so of course I filmed it. After all of that, why would I film a Panera and a loading dock? How boring, right? It wasn't until I saw the beautiful Powers architecture in photographs that I returned to film an update of that once mighty building. On to the 2010s. Gordman's moved into the space occupied by Steve & Barry's, so the anchors were at full capacity again. Phew! However, in 2014, a new challenger entered the ring. Twin Cities Premium Outlets opened a mere 7 miles northeast of Burnsville Center in the rapidly growing suburb of Eagan. Why would anyone from Eagan want to drive to that old mall when they can stay in town? Sure, the outlet mall is exposed to the elements, but the stores are new and exciting, and it does have an indoor food court. Returning to Burnsville, Gordman's closed for a while in 2017 when its parent's company declared bankruptcy. It reopened again that year after Stage Stores purchased it and a few other locations. Sears wasn't so lucky. It closed the same year, and the building still sits abandoned. 3 years later, Stage Stores filed for bankruptcy. They could not find a buyer, so Gordman's closed for good. Now we are on to this decade. On August 19th, 2020, Burnsville Center's owners announced foreclosure as $64.5 million in loans were owed on the property. In October 2020, Cohan Retail Investment bought most of the property at auction for $18 million. The auction did not include the JCPenney's, Macy's, or former Sears, as they are owned separately. In February 2021, Cohan began plans to do something with the property. They discussed selling some of the standalone buildings or even the land surrounding the mall. It began talks with the city of Burnsville and the anchor owners. They claim COVID to be a main factor in the decline of the mall. I don't know how much COVID can be blamed for the mall's decline. My friends and I used to visit the gigantic Chinese buffet in the mid-aughts, long before it was Lucky's 13. I stopped by in 2018 after my dead mall obsession had really grown. I was headed to Faribault West, but thought I'd check out a modern, healthy mall for exercise. Wow, I did not remember it looking that bad in 2005. Wait, you really want to see my old Gordman's footage? It's pretty bad. Oh, alright. First, let's hop on the elevator again and check out last year's construction. This is phone footage. This actually isn't that bad. Well, here it is. It's pretty bad, but imagine how much worse it would have been if I had released it a year ago. Oh yeah, let me fix the colors too. Something I could not have done well back then, mostly due to lack of experience and access to good tools. Alright, let's finish up this history. We are nearly done. Macy's had announced that it would close its Burnsville location in May 2020, but it was still there a year later, in May 2021. Also in May 2020, JCPenney's filed for Chapter 11 bankruptcy protection, but they were saved when Brookfield Asset Management and Simon Property Group purchased them in September 2020. And so that's where we are, as of the time of this recording, in May 2021. I am really torn on Burnsville Center. Part of me is glad to have a giant dying mall in my neck of the woods. Honestly, I have been jealous of people on the East Coast or Ohio who could drive an hour and hit up several giant, dead, or even abandoned malls. But should I really be jealous? I mean, think of the businesses lost because they couldn't afford to move. I am also assuming a stand in a food court is cheaper than rent in a strip mall, where a business would also need to supply their own seating area. Another former Hallmark. I have run across at least one other closing Hallmark and several former Hallmarks. However, I am surprised to have found two thriving Hallmarks in malls that are basically strip malls. Check out my video on Shoreview Village to see one of them. I also found one at Valley West in Bloomington, Minnesota, whose footage I plan to release this summer. Oh yes, and if you have been paying close attention to my videos, you would have seen one at River Hills, a traditional, thriving mall in Mankato. There was a time when Burnsville Center had two Hallmarks. The one you saw was Amy's Hallmark, while Evanson's Hallmark Card and Gift Shop, yes, it had a big fancy name, that was located outside of JCPenney's on the second floor, right next to Spencer's Gifts. I wonder if they were friends or enemies. I hope something good happens to Burnsville Center. A number of people have good memories of their childhoods and teenage years here. Thank you for joining me on this tour of Burnsville Center. And thank you for sticking with me so far. As I tend to do, I will leave you now, right as we leave the mall. But feel free to stay for a few minutes of outdoor footage. JCPenney's has some slick 70s architecture, and the Sears label scars leave nothing to the imagination. I hope you have a good day. Take care.